the cause of was slavery. So everything revolves around slavery. And my idea actually was to actually approach this topic from four different perspectives. Okay, so first of all, abolitionism, which is this political movement that actually helped create this necessary climate to fight slavery. The economy, because maybe you've heard that the Civil War was not about slavery, because some people say that. Some people say the Civil War was not about slavery, but was about an economic problem. Okay, and we can't forget that even though the economy is always present, at wars, the one half of the country, the southern part, had an economy based on slavery. Okay, so slavery is still the main reason of the war. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about politics. Okay, and politics in its more concrete aspect, the election of 1860 and the disputes in Congress before that, and from the judicial aspect, at least one decision taken by the Supreme Court that actually was very controversial, to say the least, and that helped actually helped the tensions escalated and ended in the Civil War. Okay. So first of all, abolitionism. So according to Britannica, this movement was responsible for creating the emotional climate necessary for ending the slave trade. Okay. And it started around 1783, finishing in 1888, when slavery was abolished in Brazil. And the main points of this movement were, first of all, to end the brutality of slavery. It was based on criticism by rationalist thinkers of the Enlightenment, of slavers' violation of the rights of man, right? And then the fact that many religious groups, among others, the Quakers and other evangelical groups, condemned slavery for its unchristian qualities, okay? Now, this sentiment, the sentiment of being against the brutalities committed by colonists, was not new, and in fact, it was not born in 1783. I mean, this abolitionist movement against Black slavery in the former British colonies, yes, that movement formally started around 1783. But I thought that it was interesting to show you that together with the colonization of the Americas, together with the colonists and the conquistadors, the Spanish conquistadors that came in the 16th century, there also came priests and people that actually revealed the brutalities that these conquistadors were committing. So probably the best known of them was the priest called Bartolome de las Casas, and this is a picture of him, who published in 1552, and I think that this is actually surprising. already in the 16th century. This book called A Brief Account on the Destruction of the Indies, right, where he actually reveals how the Spaniards slaughtered entire populations of indigenous peoples. And this is an engraving. This is a very heavy image that is in the book, and this book published in 1552 that shows, as you can see, with these conquistadors, right, Spaniards did with the populations of indigenous people. So yeah, and this is an excerpt of the book, and it's incredible that I mean, the internet is just it's so good. Okay, when we use the good side of it, because these things are available. There is this project, for those who didn't know, the Gutenberg Project, that publishes texts that are already in public dominion. Okay, and this one is available in for Kindle. This is an old translation, a translation from 1689. But in his text, the priest actually states that the Spaniards, with their barbarous and execrable actions, depopulated 10 kingdoms and around 12 million people, computing men, women, and children. So that's how he starts. Okay, so I brought this, even though this is not directly related to the American Civil War, just to show, I thought it was interesting to show that this feeling of revealing these atrocities has been kind of always present. Okay, and also just a quick reference to the Enlightenment, which is this spirit and philosophical movement, okay, of the 18th century that deeply influenced the independence of the United States. So if you remember what we saw when in the session of the independence, the Declaration of the Independence, the text, we have these paragraphs where it says that all men are created equal, and that all of us have certain unalienable rights. Among them are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So these ideas of all of us being autonomous were actually developed to their utmost by the Enlightenment. And I thought interesting also to bring the example of probably one of the best known or quintessential philosophers of the Enlightenment, Immanuel Kant, who published this book, The Groundwork on the Metaphysics of Morals, in 1785. And he brings the idea of the categorical imperative. And one of the formulations of this imperative, which is an ethical imperative, how we should, people from the Enlightenment, people from the era of reason, not from the era of obeying a king that has supposedly power coming from God. Okay, but we are people, we are rational beings, as Kant says, And this is interesting because Kant says rational beings. He doesn't say men, right? So the ideas of the Enlightenment are the ideas actually that are going to open the door also to the feminist movement and these movements that actually have allowed everyone to consider themselves autonomous and with the same rights. Okay, so the ethical imperative in one of the formulations, as Kant puts it, says, act in such a way as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of anyone else, always as an end, and never merely as a means. So this is absolutely, I would say, and absolutely incredible in the sense that, I mean, it's fantastic because it's the exact opposite idea of slavery. Because if you think of slavery, slavery considers another human being, the slave, not as an end, but it considers the slave as a means. So it's someone inferior who is going to be a means for me to get something, for me to get to make money or whatever I would like this other inferior human being to do for me. Okay. Whereas these ideas of the Enlightenment, what they say and Kant says is should never consider anyone, absolutely anyone, as a means, because rational beings are an end to themselves. Okay, so we have that, okay? These ideas, the abolitionist movement, and now I wanted to talk a little bit about the economy, okay? So we could imagine, okay, of course, things in life are never so black and white, but I think it is fair actually to say that the North and the South had roughly two different economic systems. Okay, so the North had become mostly industrialized, and capitalism was kind of a new system. So before capitalism, there was what was known as mercantilism, a system that had the principle of accumulation more than the circulation of commodities. And commodities here are understood as goods, broadly speaking. Okay. Now, there are some authors that say that capitalism has always existed. I mean, with the idea of commerce. Okay. However, if we think of modern capitalism, the way we know it today, that capitalism started with the Industrial Revolution, right, in the 19th century, or developed to the form that we know it today and that we live today. We live today in that economic system where there is the production of goods, the production of commodities, and the more products you sell, the more products you produce, and the more products you sell, there are always going to be people buying products, and this circulation is what allows the making money. Okay, so capitalism needs markets in the first place. And there's also another important idea about capitalism, which is the labor force. So the labor force is another commodity that you sell in the market. Okay, so all of us here, for example, we sell our labor force to the amount of money that the market is willing to pay, right? Now, on the other hand, the South had remained mostly agricultural, and it was a slave owner society. So the society here is more traditional in the sense that there are fewer layers to the society. There are the slave owners and the slaves, and probably this very very small middle class, and there is no labor force to be sold, right? There are slaves. Now, it's a little bit more rigid in the sense that if you are the owner of a plantation of cotton, for example, and you have slaves, then these slaves, they will only be able, and they will only work for the plantation of cotton and nothing else. That's what they are going to be able to do. Okay. So this is one of the characteristics of that type of society. Now, despite that, both systems were very profitable. So the South was as rich as the North. Okay. And the abolitionist movement had succeeded in actually prohibiting the trafficking of slaves in British colonies since 1807. Okay, so one of the consequences of that was that there was the population grew in the North more than in the South, and that in the North, even though some North states had slaves, slavery was not as expanded, and it was not as used as in the South because the soil was different, the crops were different. So most of the northern states had actually adopted this prohibition of slavery since the beginning of the 19th century. Okay, so there was this division already, this, these two countries. The southern states, mostly the southern states that had slaves, they were called the slave states, and the northern states, the free states, where slavery was not allowed. Okay, it's a very difficult situation, right? To have like two countries within one country. So it's yeah. So the end was clearly going to be a serious conflict. Okay. Now, one of the biggest problems came with the territorial expansion to the West, because Congress had a balance because there were 11 states, slave states, and 11 free states. So there was this balance, but with new territories being conquered, and with the possibility of these new territories becoming states, formal new states, there was always this question of, are these states going to be, these new states going to be free states or slave states. So the thing is that if they became free states, then Congress was going to be controlled by free states to the detriment of southern states. And the opposite is also true, right? Okay. And finally, there was also these political fight over tariffs. And tariffs are these duties that are set on imported goods. Okay, so the government actually wanted to protect factory owners, mainly from the north, from unfair competition from British companies. So they set these tariffs with the idea of using the money collected from the tariffs to build infrastructure. So to build turnpikes, to build canals, railroads, in order to improve the circulation of commodities, the circulation of goods. But southern states saw this as something unfair, because they would also have to pay the tariffs in the first place, but the benefit of that would actually go to the north instead of the south. So they were not comfortable with this situation, and they tried to actually fight against these tariffs. Now, maps. Let's take a look at maps. These are very helpful. So look, we have this situation in 1820, okay? And I would like you to not consider these parts that say territory. So it says Oregon, unorganized territory. Then we have Arkansas territory, Florida, and Michigan, because they are not states. Okay. Oh, they were not states at that time. Okay. Nor Missouri, nor Maine. Okay. I'm gonna explain why. So I want to show you this situation of 11 southern states and 11 northern states. Okay, right. So the free states of the north. So we have Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Vermont. So there are 11 states, okay? Now, in the South, we have Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. 11. Okay, so Missouri actually had enough population to be admitted as a state. And the question was, well, in Congress, is this new state going to be admitted as a slave state or as a free state? Okay, if it was admitted as a slave state, then the slave states would have one more representative in Congress, right? So the balance would be broken. So there was a negotiation, and the result of the negotiation was that Missouri was going to be admitted as a slave state, okay, after Maine was admitted as a free state. So there was one more free state, Maine, and one more slave state, Missouri. Okay. And that's how the balance in Congress remained stable. 12 free states and 12 slave states. But Congress also signed this compromise, okay, the compromise line 1360, saying that above this line or north of this line, states would have to be free states and south, slave states, okay? With the exception of Missouri, of course, right? However, tensions remained, okay? And there is another important compromise, the Compromise of 1850, after California became a state, okay? So what happens is that California was admitted as a free state, okay? And that broke the balance of free states and slave states in Congress. So they had to actually negotiate again and reach to a compromise where the territories of Utah and New Mexico, whenever they reached the amount of population, necessary population to become states, that they were going to use the principle of popular sovereignty, which means that the citizens of these future new states would decide by popular vote whether they were going to become free states or slave states. Okay. And in order to keep things at peace with southern states, they passed a new and stronger fugitive slave law. Okay, so the fugitive slave law is this law, and probably you are going to remember this movie. The movie, it's a book as well, but I remember this movie called 12 Years a Slave, which is just a beautifully made movie that tells the story of this man, a Black man who was a citizen of a free state, actually, and that he is kidnapped and he is taken to the South, and he is made a slave in the most, in an incredibly unfair situation. So if that happened to free Black people, can you imagine how cruel and how unfair the situation was for slaves of the South that escaped or that wanted to escape to the North, and that they were, it was legal for their owners to go after them, to capture them and take them back to the South. So it's just unbelievable. Okay, so with this compromise of 1850, things were apparently, at peace for a while. So what we have to, we can't forget is that, and when I say things were at peace, what I mean is that the tensions were so severe, they were so deep, because the South, or the southern states actually, were threatening of seceding. So the threat was there, and congressmen wanted actually to avoid secession, and they wanted to keep the country united. Okay, so these things that are so unfair, for example, passing a new and stronger fugitive slave law, even though it's incredibly unfair, what we have to understand is that what they wanted was to avoid the secession. They wanted to avoid a war because a secession was not going to be peaceful, right? Right. So then we get to 1850. So what happens in 1854? And this gentleman here, his name is Stephen Douglas. He was a senator from the Democratic Party. And actually, he had the responsibility of using this law of popular sovereignty because in order to organize the Nebraska-Kansas territory, because they were building a railroad from Illinois to the west. So can you imagine the the size of a project like that? It's an immense project. Okay, and Kansas was actually becoming a state. So in order to avoid tensions to escalate, he actually used the principle as popular sovereignty. And there was a popular vote in Kansas to decide whether the state would become a slave state or free state. Now, it wasn't peaceful. There was kind of a mini civil war within Kansas because people were divided. People actually fought with arms, and there were people killed and people died in the fights. And at last, Kansas became a free state after popular vote. Right. So what I thought was, okay, so congressmen are supposedly there to do their job. They have to, decide instead of, throwing the problems back to the people for the people to decide by voting, these controversial issues, But at the same time, what we have to understand is that they were actually trying to avoid conflict within Congress, okay, within the country itself, right? They were actually trying to avoid a war, okay? But in the end, it was inevitable, okay? Now, talking a little bit about Supreme Court decision, right? From the judiciary. We have this case. So this gentleman here, Dred Scott, he was a slave living in Missouri, and his owner took him to the north of the 3630 line, the compromise line, in 1834, and there he lived for 4 years. He met his wife, actually a woman that became his wife. And after those 4 years, his owner went back to Missouri and took him back to Missouri. But then after some years, his owner died. And Dred Scott opened a lawsuit to regain his freedom, claiming that because he had lived in a free state, he had the right to be free. Okay, now the case went to the Supreme Court. That it's the court that decides cases that are related to the Constitution and constitutional things. Okay. And in 1857, okay, in a shocking decision of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court denied Dred Scott's lawsuit because he, and this is the sort of the legal aspect, or it was that he had opened the lawsuit in Missouri, which was a slave state, first of all. Okay, but that's the excuse to a decision that says the following. I'm going to read this. So the Supreme Court declared that all African Americans, slave or free, were not US citizens at the time of the founding of the country and could not become citizens. They said that the founders, the foundation fathers, thought that Blacks were an inferior class of humans and had no rights which the white man was bound to respect, and no right to sue in federal court. Okay. Also, they said that the Missouri Compromise line was unconstitutional. Okay, and that the Union did not have any right to determine whether a state would have to be either free or slave, right? So this was shocking, and it only helped the tensions escalate, okay, between the North and the South. And that's how we get to the 1860 election, presidential election. So we have here the four candidates of the presidential election, okay? So we have here Abraham Lincoln, and here at the bottom we have Stephen Douglas and John Breckinridge. So the Democratic Party, which was the biggest at that time, came to the election, arrived at the election divided. Even though Stephen Douglas was a very prominent senator from the Democratic Party, his discourse was a discourse of union. He wanted actually to avoid the conflict and to avoid secession. However, the most radical Southern states did not like his rhetoric, and they preferred John Breckinridge's rhetoric, which was more in favor of, if we don't get our representative elected, we are going to secede, right? And lastly, we have John Dell, who was a candidate from a newly formed party called the Union Party. And his rhetoric was clearly to avoid the conflict, to avoid the secession, and to work in favor of keeping the country united, right? So we have this political cartoon, very interesting political cartoon, where we have here to my left, Abraham Lincoln, trying to hold part of the country, which is, you know, the country is torn apart, right? John Breckinridge just sort of ripping off, you know, part of the country. Stephen Douglas trying to turn things around, trying to turn these southern states around. And John Dell trying to glue the country that had been torn. So a very interesting image. Okay, and this is the result of the election. So Lincoln won. He got 180 electoral votes. and he won basically in the northern states. Breckinridge won the southern states, the most radical southern states. John Bell, these states that actually were slave states, but these states remained in the Union. So we can see that his discourse actually was successful in the sense that even though these were slave states, they remained in the Union. They did not secede. And Douglas, unfortunately, I mean, for him, he actually only won in Missouri. And this is a map of the situation. This is a map of the situation before and after the beginning of the war, actually. So the dark blue states are the free states. These light blue, Missouri, Kentucky, and West Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, were slave states, but they remained in the Union, okay? And, the dark gray states were states that seceded before the Battle of Fort Sumter. So they seceded right after Lincoln was inaugurated. And then we have the light gray states, slave states, that seceded after Fort Sumter. So Fort Sumter is the battle that started the war. Fort Sumter was this territory in South Carolina, but whose property was owned by the Union, okay? So all the people inside the fort that were from the Union, okay, were surrounded by the Confederates. So don't forget that the southern states that seceded, they wanted to form a confederation, okay? So that's why they are called the Confederates, okay? So when they secede, actually, and they surround the people in the fort, actually they attack the fort, and that was the excuse for Abraham Lincoln to respond to this attack, and that's when the war started in April 1861. Okay, so this is even, I guess, a clearer map, right? Now, the war starts. I'm not going to talk about the battles and all that. However, there is this, and I can make this PowerPoint available to you. There is this video I'm going to show you here. It's very good. It's called the Civil War Animated Map, that shows all the battles of the Civil War. All the battles of the Civil War, one by one. And it has a great explanation of all these years from the aspect, from the point of view of the war strategies and the army, okay? So let me show you.
Now an influential U.S. senator. When Lincoln wins the 1860 presidential election, Southerners rightly suspect that he plans to abolish slave states, secede from the Union. Together, they form the Confederate States of America and appoint Jefferson Davis as president. The growing divisions have become very real.
Okay.
Casualties. The Battle of Bull Run is the bloodiest battle in American history up to that time. Confederate success continues with victories at Wilson's Creek, Missouri, and at Ball's Bluff, Virginia. Battles flare along the coast as the North begins to blockade southern ports in hopes of strangling the South into submission.
You see, so it's an actual excellent material, actually. that shows all the battles and within the map of the United States. Very interesting, very interesting. Okay, here, good. Now, but some other important facts that are going to lead to the abolition of slavery. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln actually passes the Emancipation Proclamation, and this proclamation actually, which is an act, is a law, said basically, or stated that all slaves within the rebel states, so the Confederate states, the states that had seceded, right? All those slaves were free. Now, you might think, but what's the use of that? If it's because he was saying, look, we have an enemy, right? We are at war. So we are fighting the enemy. Now, that enemy has slaves. So all those slaves, the slaves of the enemy, are free, okay? So it seems useless, but it's not, because the idea was, if we win the war and we get these territories back, all these slaves, they already have a law that is going to free them, okay? Now, the downside of this proclamation is that there were states within the Union that were still slave states. And the proclamation did not say anything about those slaves. So yes, it was not it did not guarantee the complete abolition of slavery. Although I think it's an enormous step to the final abolition of slavery, which came in 1865, okay? Now, the costs of the Civil War. This is just incredible, the fact that the amount of soldiers and citizens, non-soldiers, that died in the Civil War, if we think that from the Union there were 350,000 deaths, and this from the Confederacy, 250,000 deaths. So that amounts to roughly 600,000 deaths in the Civil War in those 4 years. That is almost the same amount of all the soldiers that have died in all the other major US wars. So that death toll is tremendous. So it was the war. This war devastated the country. Not to mention the economic costs. So President Lincoln knew that the Emancipation Proclamation was not enough. So he actually passed in Congress a constitutional amendment, the 13th Amendment, with the intention of abolishing slavery, right? So what does the amendment say? It was not easy to pass the amendment because even though in the Senate, the majority was a Republican from his party, in the House of Representatives, there was a Democratic majority, not in favor of the amendment. However, he managed to negotiate with some Democratic representatives, and the amendment was passed, okay, and ratified at the end of 1865, December 1865. So Section 1 says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, basically, shall exist within the United States. So with this amendment, slavery was abolished. Okay. And Section 2 of the amendment says that Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Okay. So finally, the reason and what had caused the war was abolished. Unfortunately, President Lincoln, fortunately, he was reelected, but he was assassinated in April 1865. So he managed to pass the amendment in January 31st, 1865. So 2 months later, February, March, 3 months later, in April, he was assassinated. But fortunately, the amendment was ratified by the necessary number of states in December of the same year, and slavery was considered to be illegal in the United States, right? So these are the references. Okay, as usual, I can make this presentation available. And I guess that as usual, you can, if you're interested, you can send Jessica an email, and she's going to send this presentation to you. Okay, so now I'm open to questions, and please feel free to ask in English or in Portuguese. Okay, you can send an email to jessica.fraga@alumni.org.br. Okay, if you are interested in the presentation in the PowerPoint. Okay, so please feel free to ask. Now that I've finished the presentation, you can ask either in English or in Portuguese. That's okay with me. Okay. Comments, reactions? No.
I have a reaction here. I really enjoyed your presentation. It was really fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria Amélia. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so well, I guess that's all. I just want to thank you all for being here, and well, see you. And the next presentation is from Talita. She's going to be talking about Moby Dick, if I'm not mistaken, right? And I'm going to follow the following week, not next week, but in 2 weeks' time, with the second half, right, of the 19th century, okay, going into the 20th century.
Yes, Enrique, thank you so much. It was fantastic as always. Your lectures are always amazing. And yes, you're correct. Everyone, next week, Talita is going to talk about Moby Dick, which was written more or less around the same time as the Civil War. So we can have, we can relate those two lectures, right? So the what was happening in the US when Moby Dick was written. So that was fantastic.
Okay, so have a great evening. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and have a wonderful weekend. Okay, so I'm saying goodbye.